What does a beautiful future look like to you?
You can flip a negative mood on its head.
This was a talk that was all over the place, but then New York, you are all over the place.
There are experiences that you just don't get anywhere else.
Hello, I'm Taj Greenlee, Associate Director of 92Y Talks. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this very special collaboration with HBO to celebrate the premiere of Coastal Elites. We're thrilled to have the writer and director of this comedic satire, Paul Rudnick and Jay Roach, with us, in addition to the amazingly talented cast, Bette Midler, Kaitlyn Dever, Dan Levy, Sarah Paulson, and Issa Rae. Filmed remotely during quarantine and using social distancing, Coastal Elites brings us the story of 5 people navigating politics, culture, and the pandemic. This HBO special presentation is now available to stream on HBO Max. CNN Newsday's Alisyn Camerota serves as our moderator. Now, without further ado, and on behalf of the 92nd Street Y and HBO, please enjoy Coastal Elites.
I am thrilled to be with all of you. I've been really looking forward to having this conversation about this HBO special presentation, Coastal Elites. So let me just go around and introduce everybody. If you could wave when I say your name, that would be great, and then we'll get into this conversation. So we are joined by the incredible Bette Midler, who of course plays the character Miriam. Dan Levy, you play Mark. We have Issa Rae, who plays Cali, Sarah Paulson, who plays Clarissa, and we'll get more into what these characters all represent in a moment. And joining us, we have Kaitlyn Dever, she plays Sharon. And then we have Jay Roach, who is the director and executive producer. We have Paul Rudnick, who is the writer of Coastal Elites. Again, this HBO special presentation, and we're so happy to be partnering with the 92nd Street Y. Okay, so on that note, let's just talk about this really creative, interesting project that you all have been working on. Bette, I want to start with you. So tell us about your character of Miriam, the New York Times loving, Barnes and Noble tote bag carrying, New York City liberal, Jewish liberal. And if this is an archetype that you relate to and perhaps know.
Not only do I know her, I think I am her. I have spent the last 25 years in New York, and I know this character quite well. I see her everywhere. Whenever I go to the West Side, I always see her. She used to be, you used to see her in the Village, but she doesn't live there anymore. She's uptown, and she's moved way uptown. And she's had a marvelous life, and she feels that she's had a life of service, but she also feels that she is carrying the banner of civilization, basically. And I think that I just love her. I love her how civilized she is. I love how aspirational she is. I love how she wants to be how she's a reader. You know, she wants to spread knowledge. She wants people to love the intellectual pursuits and and everything that New York City has to offer. Its museums, its culture. She loves her culture. She loves culture. And I think a lot of school teachers are like that. You know, she was married to a school teacher, and yes, I know them very well, and I identify with them very strongly. I come from I have several librarians in my family. I would have been one myself if I hadn't got the bug, and I think when she says "I'm the wall," I think, maybe I shouldn't spoil it. When she says "I'm the wall," I think she really does believe it. I think she really does believe it.
And that means what? That she's the resistance? How did you interpret that?
Yeah, yes, I would gather. I think actually that everybody on this show is the resistance. And I think that the idea of coastal elites, they have been this minority, as Paul was saying earlier, has been denigrated and demonized, only because they're tolerant. They're tolerant people, and they want other people to be. The idea is live and let live, and lots of people don't want that. A lot of people don't want you. They want you to live their way. And I feel that she's a very tolerant person, and I feel that she seeks out others who are tolerant as well. And she's always shocked when she comes across when she meets people who aren't, because in her world everyone is.
But she did have that confrontation with the MAGA hat wearing guy, where she goes up. And why does she confront him? I mean, does she want to learn about him, or is she offended by what she sees in him?
I believe all of the above. I think she's offended. I think she's curious, because that one thing that does define her is her curiosity. I think she's curious, and I think also it's a bridge too far. It's a line. It's there. You know, what they say, a line in the sand. For her, it's a line in the sand for someone to be so arrogant as to turn their back on what the city really is. The city is a very diverse place. There are people all around, coming from all over the world, and I think that this proud arrogance that this gentleman displays in wearing that MAGA hat in the Starbucks, I think that's the line in the sand for her.
She has a lot of really funny lines. What was it like to deliver those lines? Thank you, Dr. Scholes. What was it like to deliver those lines, in an empty room?
Great. Love empty. Love it. No other actors, none of those fucking actors. Stepping on my lines. I'm kidding. It's interesting because it was actually the best, one of the great, what's the word? Concentration experiences that I've ever had. All I had to do was look in here and be there and imagine and see that guy on the other side of the little camera. That's all I had to do. Spend my time making him understand me. I didn't have to worry about anybody over here or behind me or anything. It was just this complete focus, and I really enjoyed it. It was a very different experience.
Okay, I'll ask all of you about that experience, but I do want to move on, and let's talk to Dan Levy. You come up next in the satire itself. So tell us about Mark. And he's gotten this golden opportunity, I guess, to play the character of a lifetime, or what he considers this golden opportunity. And that is this superhero named Fusion, who is a gay superhero. And one of the incredible things about your performance was watching your character kind of figure out all the different ways he could play this character. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was really sort of fascinating about what particularly kind of piecing it all together was that you're playing with so many different variables. You're playing with the kind of lunacy of waiting for a job, which I think for actors out there who are waiting to hear about whether they've booked something or whether they're getting a call back, you end up reliving moments in your head over and over and over again. Did I mess this up? So the paranoia was really at play. And then you couple that with a level of responsibility that I think he feels he has so close to him, that kind of, he's like one step away from representing something that I think means so much to him. So there's that level of anxiety on top of it. And then, add the politics of it all on top of that, and you're left with an incredibly shaky human being who is just trying to kind of articulate his feelings to a therapist that really is getting an earful. So it led to a lot of fun things to kind of mine out of the story. So yeah, it was a hugely challenging thing for me, because I don't get opportunities to do monologues that often. So it was a joy.
I bet. I mean, he was so, at first, when you first come on the screen and you're talking to your therapist, the question for the viewer is, okay, am I going to recognize this character? Is this somebody, another archetype sort of that I know? But then you're so multidimensional in it, and you got to act all of those different dimensions.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think I'm not gonna lie, it's like there's a bit of relief in that, only because I think the idea of working with a monologue in and of itself, part of the challenge is, how do you keep it interesting? How do you kind of build all these different layers to what you're saying, so that when someone is really sitting down and watching what you're doing, that they're constantly kind of stimulated, particularly in the way that this was shot, which was directly into camera. There's really nothing else between you and the viewer but either a computer screen or a television screen. So knowing that added another level of just, I guess, work in terms of figuring out how do you keep the energy up? When do you bring it down? When do you have some fun with it? Where is the humor appropriate? Where is it not? What are the turns? I think fortunately all of that was baked into the piece. So for me, it was really just about learning the lines well enough to then feel a sense of ease delivering them. And as Paul and Jay can attest, I didn't know them very well on the day.
You knew them so well on the read through. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you were
like all
you killed it.
I was screaming on the day because I had it. And then I get very nervous, and I was so panicked and sweaty, and the right out the gate, I got it all the way through. Then the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth times I'm stumbling. Wow. And then finally I took a little walk around my house and came back and sat down and did it again. Felt a little bit more comfortable. And funnily enough, when we were shooting it, there was like a little monitor right underneath the camera that I was covering up.
Me too.
And I uncovered the monitor because when I had been rehearsing this by myself, I had been doing this into my computer camera as if I was actually speaking to someone over Zoom on a computer. So the minute the familiarity of revealing a little monitor underneath came into play, I was instantly more comfortable, and things kind of fell into place. And we eventually got it. But there was a panicked period of time where I messaged Kaitlyn after, and I was like, were you? I was very nervous.
I was dying too.
I was so nervous
I was
too.
so nervous.
So Kaitlyn, you relate to that experience that Dan was having?
Yes, definitely. I was sweating in my scrubs, as I am now in this humidity of this. I'm in a car. I just want to point out that I am in a car.
Windows down, at least. Do you have the air conditioning?
No, I have everything rolled up and locked.
Car running? Do you have any air?
There was a power outage where I'm staying, but everything is all good now. But still don't have power. But at least this all worked well.
We're very grateful that you're making it work, even in motion in a car.
I had to be here with you guys.
That is great. Okay, so Issa, let me skip around to you for a second, because I think that your character, Cali, is also so interesting. She's this boarding school classmate of Ivanka Trump, and she's wildly wealthy. And she's, I guess, because we know that she's lived this life of privilege, at first we wonder if she'll be relatable, and somehow you make her just incredibly down to earth, even though she's wildly wealthy, and you point out wealthier than the Trumps. And so tell us about your character.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. She's incredibly privileged, but she's also Black. And I feel like when you're Black and privileged, you have the luxury or not of toggling between two worlds until it comes down to it. In this case, there are racial uprisings everywhere, and you kind of have to choose. You have to choose, like, are you going to be in touch, and are you going to tap into your Blackness and fight the fight? or are you gonna choose to kind of overlook it and stay in this privileged area, which we've seen a lot of celebrities, disappointed celebrities do during this time. I won't name any names.
Oh, please.
I think
name a name. Name a name. I'm begging
you already know.
That's
Some
not
of
fair.
them try to run for president.
You deserve a reward. Cool, come
Some of
on.
them are trying to get the sign ups to vote. Anyway, so she's making a decision. I think she's also reconciling with the fact, exactly what you said, that she also happens to be in the same social circle as Ivanka Trump. So how do you fit in those two worlds? It's embarrassing. I would be embarrassed, if Ivanka could call me right now and be like, "Hey girl, what's up? So you trying to join us?" I think that there's just something mortifying about that, but that's what she's reconciling with.
Right. And you did that, so compellingly. And she's wrestling with, do I work it from the inside? Do I go to the White House and try to have this conversation with her and kind of go along with whatever this plan is that she has, or do I not? And so your thoughts on how that worked.
Yeah, I would like to say that she was convinced by her dad to do so. Her dad made a very compelling argument. And, there is something to be said about being able to be kind of a spook who sat by the door in that way, and infiltrate and listen and feel like you can make a difference. But after a while, you become part of that system, whether you like it or not. And I think it's also the appearance of even associating with these people. You've seen certain people try to do that with this particular administration and have conversations, but I think the very act of trying to get on their level is degrading, and it says a lot more to kind of work with them than to actively work against them. Because when you're thinking about the line of morality is just so it's so blurred with them, so it just feels like you're compromising a sense of self by even considering trying to be in cahoots with them in any way, no matter the goal.
And in terms of the title, Coastal Elites, Bette's character is a school teacher, a public school teacher, as is her husband, but she lives in New York. And she's culturally sophisticated and likes the public theater. And so that's in some way seen as, culturally elite. And then your character is wildly wealthy, but Black. And so what does the term coastal elite mean to you?
I wasn't familiar with the term, to be honest, until I saw this project, and then I was like, "Oh, this is a thing. This is I'm a coastal elite. Oh, okay." So I think it is.
Yes, you are.
I am a coastal elite, unfortunately, but I am who I am. But I think it's obviously used to dismiss the views of a certain culture and a certain archetype of the States. And I think Bette touched on this. There's a specific sense of, again, morality, of a sense of culture and pride and what's right and wrong. And we're also off on the sidelines. We're not necessarily involved in everything. It's like we're perched and in some cases looking down on everyone else. And I think that's part of the fear and the divide of this country, is that coastal elites don't seem like one of the people, like the everyday.
I think coastal elites, they can call them anything they want, but I don't think they see themselves that way. And I don't think Paul Rudnick and Jay Roach see coastal elites as I don't think they see it as a class thing. I think that when you talk about coastal elites, the people that I have known for the last 25 years really do try very hard to raise people up. They don't try to put people down. I'm not talking about Goldman Sachs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who really try to contribute to the community. And a lot of them are wealthy, but a lot of them are just plain old middle class. And they really do try, and they happen to live on the coast. So I think it's pejorative, and I also think it's unfair. It's really unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I think that that comes with even a project like this. You wonder, we're all in our bubbles, we're all in our echo chambers. And so there is, we all think one way about the other. And I think when you're used to being around the same people and you're used to hearing the same opinions, that only exacerbates the divide. So it's all a part of it. I didn't make up the term, but I'm going to identify as a coastal elite. I'm getting it tatted on my back tomorrow.
Paul, what did you mean by coastal elites?
Well, I think, as you can see, it can mean just about anything. I think but it's often used as a slur, especially by this administration. It's sort of their version of the deplorables. And I thought that did seem terribly unfair because it can cover such a wide range of income levels, education levels, you name it. I thought, no, coastal elites is not something, it's not a mark of shame. And it's become that. So I wanted to explore, okay, what if we really took a look at a group of people who could be considered under the title. And I think it will surprise audiences, which is something that I very much wanted to do. I thought if people bring preconceptions to the title alone, they will be surprised, they'll laugh, they may be shocked, they may think, oh, wait, that's not what I thought it was going to be. And that's the best you can hope for, I think, as a writer, is that kind of surprised laughter, especially. And I think something else I very much wanted to do, which is true of almost all the characters, who are all curious people and people who are often confronting the rest of the country. And they want to figure this thing out because there is a level of national anxiety that has kind of ruled our lives for the past 4 years. And so I wanted to see what that might entail, and also to not limit it to just people who live on the coast or just people who might be considered hyper-educated and wealthy. So you'll find, I know, in with Sarah's character and with Sharon's character, they are people who have very close and sometimes family contact with very different opinions, with people who lead very different lives. And that was important to me to represent that, to represent everyone and let everyone be heard from, sometimes from an angle, but it's not just the elites. And that's what I think we were all after.
And Sarah, that does lead us to your character, who is Clarissa, and she's this sort of self-helpy meditation influencer, video influencer. But her family is not from the coast. And so she has this experience that so many families have had in the past 4 years of going home and trying to reconcile with her very Trump-loving family, and I guess trying to understand them. Is that how you approached it?
I think I certainly think that is her goal. I think she would like to try to practice what she's preaching a bit and try to take some of what she's aiming to put out into the world and put it into practice. But, sometimes those things go very awry when you involve members of your family. I just thought a lot about my mother, because my mother, at 27 years old, moved from Tampa, Florida. She was born in Alabama, had a cotillion, the whole thing, moved from Florida away from her incredibly conservative parents and moved to Manhattan, got a job as a waitress at Sardi's, and, pursued her career as a writer, and spent many, many days and trying to find a way to, and I remember hearing phone calls, she'd have screaming phone calls with her parents because they just could not see the world in the same way. And my mother kept fighting and fighting and fighting and pushing and pushing and pushing. I, in turn, having watched all that, and I was so devoted and in love with my grandparents that I never wanted to voice any of my opinions because they do not align with them at all, but I feel so much affection for them. So it felt like I was sort of riding a funny knife's edge of sort of my mother and myself, in terms of my mother always making the big fight to try to get them to see what she would call the light, what I would call the light. But it was, I've always taken a much more back-footed approach in this one area of my life. Because I just don't, my grandparents are 90 years old, and I think they believe in the rapture, and I don't know that I want to disabuse them of that notion at this particular moment in their life. But my mother has been fighting that fight for, decades. So I sort of think of Clarissa as honoring my mother in some way, in her noble pursuit to try her best and ultimately not succeed.
So Sarah, what I was about to say was that, you don't even have to be like a self-help guru to be struggling with finding a moment of Zen, or a place of Zen. And it feels like so many families have described how estranged they've become during this time, which is such a shame. Do you believe, from your own personal experience that you just described and from playing this character, is the gulf too wide at this point?
Oh God, I hope not. I feel like if it is, we're in for a very rude awakening. If you don't call the one that we're currently living in a rude awakening, I don't want to live a life devoid of hope in that way. So I think Clarissa is a wonderful example, as is my mother, to a person who has every intention of making real meaningful contact and has real hope. And actually, Clarissa's doing something a little bit different, which is she is trying to tolerate and trying to muscle through, and she's not spending her time trying to convert. She's trying to just coexist. And what she's experiencing is not only her family's inability to do that, but they're not even welcoming of her worldview. And that's sort of where we get into real trouble. There's so much conflict there because, sort of to echo what Issa was saying, there is this commitment some of us have to one particular way of thinking, and we may believe we're on the right side of history and are, but there are people who don't support that way of thinking. And what are we to do? Just not fight and not try to get people to have their eyes open to a different way of thinking. It's like only watching MSNBC does kind of keep you only informed in a particular vantage point, which, you may subscribe to, but it doesn't, I think, keep I'm going with a lot of metaphors right now. What's the thing a horse wears? The blinders.
Blinders.
Yeah. It sounds like, I think, I'm sort of talking around it, but I know that I have taken often, with my grandparents in particular, the path of least resistance, because I don't want to create the friction and I don't want there to be trouble. And I have so much love and respect and admiration for them as people. And they have so much to do with, who I am as a person and the things that are good about me as a person. So, and yet I do not believe a single thing they believe, politically or otherwise, spiritual, religious, all that stuff. It's hard. But I have so much respect and love. And so I try to sit in that place. And it's not always easy and it's not always comfortable. But I think the more we're able to allow tolerance to be, permeate the conversation, the better we would all be. Even though I think it's really, really hard, because some of it is just asinine and insane, and it's hard to move around it. But I have hope. I hope to have hope. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So
totally. I mean, I think that you've just articulated it beautifully, that you have to lean into the love that you share, because what else is there? What other bridge can you build with somebody? And so, Kaitlyn, that leads us to your character of Sharon. She's a nurse from Wyoming who comes to New York to help out when the hospitals are in such, dire shape. And she meets a patient who seems eerily like Bette's character in many ways. And that character, who I believe is named Miriam, ends up really changing or impacting her, I guess, or changing her perspective. So tell me your take on that.
I mean, getting to play Sharon was just really such an honor. I think that, playing the emotion of it all was really, really difficult. And it just sort of made me think about, you know, what these first responders and what these nurses actually go through every day, which is like meeting all of these people and connecting with them and then losing them. And especially, you know, a character like Sharon, Miriam made a lot of impact on her and really changed her view politically, but also they really connected on a really deep emotional level. And I found that to be extremely moving. And, you know, it was, this role felt, you know, so much bigger than me. And it was just such a, I mean, when Jay told me he wanted me to play this role, I was like, are you sure? It feels like such a big responsibility, because these people are, you know, are real life heroes. And I just think that the monologue itself is just, you know, I think for me, the challenge was just sort of focusing on not getting too dark and trying to stay on the lighter moments. I mean, Paul's writing is just so brilliant that there are these really amazing comedic moments too, but the story itself and the monologue I did have was so heartbreaking and tragic, that it was hard to not get too sad about it.
Yeah, no, I got that. I mean, I think that it helped that Paul punctuated it with some F-bombs. That always like the mood. But how were you able to channel the medical workers? A medical worker.
I mean, yeah, I had a lot of, I mean, it's sort of like in our faces now, just on the news, every time you turn it on, you can't really escape it. But in terms of just getting into that headspace, I talked to Jay a lot about it and just how to approach it. And it's really just about like, they're just exhausted people. They're just constantly exhausted all the time, but they're the strongest and bravest people in the world. So I think it was just finding the right balance of the just constant exhaustion. I mean, the worst part about it was reading that line and talking about where Sharon mentions the refrigerated trucks parked outside of the hospital. I mean, that just like punches you in the gut. It's just the worst thing in the world. My cousin is also a nurse right now, and she is dealing with COVID, and I was able to talk to her too, which was very, very helpful.
So Jay, what was it like directing this in this COVID-19 world?
It was surreal, but it had some attributes, you know, some sort of surprisingly focusing kind of aspects to it. You know, on a set, usually there's a million people around you all day and trying to help you, but also you have to pay attention to a million people at the same time, when really what you want to pay attention to is just the great writing and the great performances. And I always, when I'm directing, I always have to say script and cast, because otherwise you forget that that's what matters. In this show, that's all there was. I didn't have any other tricks. We couldn't really drop in a whole bunch of cameras and make people move around in a really interesting way. It just had to be really excellent acting and great characters written by Paul. And it was a little weird just being there in a Zoom camera, but it was surprisingly intimate too. And again, I directed theater very briefly before I directed film, and it reminded me of that. It was based on a play. It was originally going to be at the Public, and Paul's such a great writer for these kinds of monologues that are meant to take you on a good, rich, but, you know, extensive journey, a good long journey. And we knew we needed the best actors in the world, which we got in every situation. And then it was just rehearsing just like this on Zoom and trying to communicate in very surreal spaces, with our number one priority and my number one anxiety dream of keeping everybody safe, which we did. But that was always the priority, is just following all the protocols and figuring out some way to do this good work while also not having anybody be exposed to anything dangerous. So that was that's what made it a challenge. But the joy of just participating and watching these guys do these incredible, as I say, just take you on these incredible journeys through their stories was what always made it worth it and really fulfilling.
And why was it a challenge to keep everybody safe? Weren't they alone in a room?
Well, because so the challenge was that we kind of had everybody shot in some little satellite space that wasn't their main space in their house, and we originally hoped we could just drop in cameras and treat it like talking to someone in a space capsule, but it didn't quite turn out to be that simple. We did need a few crew members on the location, but not in the room with the actors when they were shooting. So we had a COVID manager, and to make sure everyone was tested. Any crew that were nearby were tested, and the actors were all tested as well. So everything was wiped down. The equipment was dropped in early. There was a lot of kind of buffers required, but that was it. We just had a tiny crew, but it was limiting enough that we couldn't move in multiple cameras and do all the kind of choreography you would normally do on a movie set.
How much were you freaking out when Dan didn't know his lines?
I wasn't.
Come clean, Jay. Now's the time.
I never even slightly worried. He nailed it so amazingly on the very first take. And yes, then he kind of, was looking for something else, I think, in the other takes. And then he came back in like 4 or 5 straight amazing takes. And that's
It is a tricky thing when you're a perfectionist and you stumble on something, because then your mind is constantly just,
you're like, here it comes.
Well, yeah, and there are all these kind of landmines that are like in the process of just saying the words themselves. And then when you get tripped up on one, you're thinking about another one, and then if you get tripped up on the other one, then I'm thinking like, well, I don't even want to use this, so this can't happen. Anyway,
well,
I think I might have exaggerated how bad how tricky it was, because I did end up getting it.
Kaitlyn, what were you going to say?
Well, I noticed that my problem or my issue is after you do it a couple of times, you start to think, once you've reached a certain part of the monologue, you start thinking, oh, have I already said this? Am I just repeating what I've said already? And in this take, it gets very confusing.
Bette, were you having that same issue?
No. But I completely understand. Actually, that's what my days are like. Did I do this before? What day is it? Where am I? What's happening? I mean, I am so confused. Every day I get up and I say, what the fuck? I don't have no.
There is a particular hamster wheel quality to what we are all living in.
What I don't understand is, why is it everybody? I can understand if it's one person, one family, 20 families, Denver. I can't understand the whole world. It's like, really? It doesn't make any, you can't, can you? I can't. And every day I get up and I say, today I'm going to figure it out. I just
let us know when you do. And so Paul, Jay just talked about how this was supposed to be a play. This was supposed to be a play at the Public Theater in New York, and then COVID scuttled that plan. And then you were writing in real time as coronavirus was gripping the country. So how did that affect everything then that you were working on?
Well, one of the advantages of shooting something so close to the time it was going to air was that I was able to rewrite constantly and update the material to see how these enormous, overwhelming events, the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests, would impact the lives of these characters as they do all of our lives. So it was oddly a great opportunity to create the largest possible vision. And I found that the stakes only skyrocketed for absolutely everyone, because even before, when they were dealing with this administration and their place in the world and their friends and families and their anxiety levels, that was huge. But when you add a global pandemic to that, and then you add protests that have became so essential and so heartbreaking and so necessary to that mix, it's very volatile and very exciting at the same time. So as a writer, I welcomed all of that material and the ability to say, okay, keep going, let it all mix together the way it does in our real lives. It's also the mix of comedy and tragedy, which no one can avoid. That's the human condition. And that's what I was after with all of these. And then to have access to these extraordinary performers, you get, as a writer, I felt absurdly spoiled. And with Jay's guidance, it was like, oh my God, this is what every writer dreams of. And plus the focus of being able to hone in on these performances, on these characters, and bring in every aspect of the world, you thought, oh, okay, that's the challenge, and that's the thrill of a lifetime.
Okay, last question for everybody. Our time is running out, sadly. I'll start with you, Bette. What do you want viewers to take away from this?
I was just about to say something that I was about to remark on something that Paul said. You know, it started out as a play. It was supposed to be a play at the Public Theater, of all things. And it was a series of monologues, and it was going to be live, and people were going to do it 8 times a week. And you were going to see the full body, and it was going to be an acting exercise. But somehow this pandemic came along and Zoom came along, and somehow this format of just talking into a camera suddenly became basically the only thing you could do. And it's so peculiar that it's just like, we have a word in Jewish, beshert. It's meant to be. Isn't that right? It's like a destiny. It's like destiny. It was meant to be. This was never meant to be a play. This was always meant to be seen this way, in this format, in these grid, and on this grid, and with this intimacy that Jay spoke of. And it's so odd the way it just fell together. But I do believe that it was meant to be. I mean, I'm not saying you brought on the pandemic, Paul. Maybe you did, but it was meant to be in this format, and only in this format. So odd, so odd.
That's really a cool sentiment. So, Kaitlyn, what do you want people to take away?
I mean, I think that whenever we can, express our frustration about what's going on in the world and add some sort of comedy to it and make people maybe laugh a little bit is always really great. And I think the way this whole thing is shot, we're so close to each character's faces. And I think that when people and humans are watching this, I think they're able to, or hopefully they'll be able to connect to these people even more so if this was just maybe a regular movie shot on a normal camera. But because we're so close to these characters, I think that, my hope is that we're able to connect to these people in some way and hopefully start a conversation.
Dan, how about you?
I think the brilliance of each of these monologues is that there's something revelatory and unexpected about each of these characters that you will only learn if you listen. If you listen to what they're saying, if you stick around to listen. And I feel like culturally we are so kind of, there's this kind of short, we have a very short attention span. And I think what's so special about what's going on in this piece is that you really have to listen to people and you have to stick it out, because everybody at the beginning of each of these different pieces is presenting something that instinctively you kind of make a quick judgment pass on. And it's not until you start to learn and listen that you understand that everybody is more complicated than we kind of flippantly write them off to be at times. And that, I think, is what's really telling of the time and really special about why this is happening now, because I really feel like this is a time for people to listen. We're so divided to the point where we won't listen, or we've kind of blocked certain things out. So it really is confronting you with the act of listening, and that to me is a very cool thing.
Sarah, what you took away or what you want people to take away?
Oh, I couldn't possibly add to anything after what all three of them just said. I mean, it would just be me repeating.
Oh, come on.
No, I don't have anything.
Come on.
No, I think I hear my mother calling. No, I hope it sparks conversation. I really do. I hope it sparks conversation, real conversation, not being talked at, not being sort of having your arm twisted to listen, but people sort of having an openness to confront their own, judgments about themselves and about people that think differently than they do. I mean, I hope this is seen by people who don't, I hope people who aren't coastal elites. I hope the viewing body is larger than that, obviously, because I want everyone to have a great success and everything. But what I really care about is that it reaches the ears of those who really need to hear it. I recognize every single one of these people in this piece and have affection for at least on the page, because I haven't watched it, but I know that that they're representative of real people. And I think the more we could let it all in, I like to use my hands a lot. See, Bette, I said I don't have anything to offer, and I wish you would have just let me. If I do this, it sort of helps obfuscate.
I'm stealing that.
Okay, I just do this and just like obfuscate what you don't have to say.
No, I think what you're saying is so true. I mean, I hate to horn in, but
oh, please do.
You hope that you will bring in people. You hope that you will bring in people who haven't considered this point of view before, and that maybe they will take another look at their own prejudices or biases. Or there's an expression I heard recently: open-mindedness. I mean, this isn't old, but we've closed our minds. Mm-hmm. We've closed our minds, and we're standing pat, and we're saying, "Well, I'm not moving. And this is what I believe in. I ain't moving." And I think that's a terrible, terrible thing to, it's a terrible thing to box yourself in that way. Mm-hmm. It cuts off most of life. And
see, you always want to be saved by Bette Midler, guys. I tell you, not at all. I'll start failing and then have her come in and bring it up.
I just feel like, that's what I'm standing pat. I'm not moving. And you just, in a way, do you think to yourself, am I doing that? Am I doing that? I try really hard to read a wide variety, and I try to look at the other side, and I try to listen, and I think, well, this is a lie. That's a lie. That's not bad. That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. I believe that, but I don't believe everything else around it. Mm-hmm. So I try to be open-minded, and I just would like, if we could do this, if we could open some people's minds, I think that would be a great thing.
Issa, was this maddening? Was it cathartic? I mean, what was your takeaway from being involved in this presentation and this whole experience?
A little of both. I mean, it was cathartic because, you're saying the lines of a character who agrees with you, who sees the world like you see it, albeit like way richer. But at the same time, even seeing the work and seeing everything that this man has said back to back, seeing all of these experiences back to back is just like, we're really, this is our reality in a very sad way. And I think in particular, I hope that, again, to the echo chamber of it all, that people who don't agree with this, who are on the fence, watch this and get a sense of just how absurd the times we're living in are, how absurd this leadership, and it doesn't have to be this way. So I'm so grateful to be a part of this, and I hope people watch. People whose minds can change, watch. Open-minded people watch.
That's Jay, your parting thoughts, as well as if you would just speak to what Dan said about how we are all this ADD culture, short attention span, and you're asking people to really sort of sit there and dive into these monologues, and if you have any concern about that.
Well, it's actually right off of what Dan said, that we carry around our prejudices and we sometimes allow whole groups of people to be put into a basket that is a label, and this label of coastal elites is, as Paul said, is not just the flip side of deplorables. And what I hope people get out of this, if they do take the time to go past the first judgments, is that what I love about every one of these characters is they care so much about what's going on and what's wrong, and that they're just coping as best they can, but they're also going, I can't figure it out. Like Bette said, I wake up every day wanting to figure this out, and having them all share their intense drive that comes from caring to just figure it out is so compelling. And I think
not just to figure it out, but to actually be, to help.
Yeah, to be a constructive force.
To be constructive, exactly.
Active. Yeah. And so I think, I hope people will, and this is why having these incredible actors do this, and with a combination of heartbreaking writing and also hilarious writing, will get people, invite them in and entertain them while they're also considering what they might have in common with these characters instead of what might differentiate themselves from the characters.
It answers the big question of why, I think, too, which is a question that I often ask myself when I'm stumped by people's ways of thinking. You know, it's like the impulse is to be like, but that's not right. I always try to stop and say, okay, why? Why do they believe this?
Why do they
is
think
it
that?
circumstantial?
Yeah.
Is it how they're, you know, is it financial? Is it emotional? How and why are people thinking this way? And I think what this does is provide the why to people who might be curious about these people. It explains why they're doing the things they do, and why they're saying the things they do, and why they're believing the things they believe in, which I think is a really important piece of the understanding puzzle.
Paul, your thoughts listening to everybody say all this?
Oh, well, I think there's something, everyone in the world right now is so deluged with news reports, with op-ed pieces, with tweets, with Facebook posts, with varying opinions just bombarding us all the time. And something that I love that only fiction can really do, and only drama and only these extraordinary performances that can do, is contain the contradictions. You could talk about how crazy you are. You could talk about the things you don't understand, the things you're reaching to understand, because you're not limited by, you know, a soundbite. You're not limited by which website you tend to land on every morning. You're not limited by the news anchor you prefer. So that these are people who are struggling, and that's what makes them magnetic. And I think beyond that, I just feel that I don't know how anyone could resist this particular group of performers being given opportunities to really show what they can do, you know. And that's just, as Jay and I were filming it, we would just marvel at it, and we would be on texting each other during the filming going, oh, it was like watching an Olympic athlete, where we would go, oh my God, she's so great, oh my God, he's doing so wonderfully, and we'd wonder, are they going to stick the landing, you know? And so it would be such a
are they going to stick the landing?
Except Dan. We were always saying,
Dan. They were worried. They were very worried about Dan. The landing was not going to be good. We weren't sure.
No,
not true.
Everybody came through. That it was, and the amount of, I think, exclamation points and caps that we were using was absurd.
We should publish our text. We should publish those texts. They would be very revealing of our joy, our ecstasy.
If the audience can share our level of joy in this, that would be, you know, a wonderful thing.
Well, guys, it's been great to talk to you. The satire, the special presentation is so thought-provoking. It's so compelling to watch. And so it's just been great to hear the backstory of how it came together and what all of your thoughts were. And so I want to thank everybody. Kaitlyn, thank you. Bette, thank you. Kaitlyn, I'm so glad you were able to make it even with or without your seatbelt.
Kaitlyn.
Talk to you, Sarah. Thank you. Jay, thank you. And Issa,
good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the 92nd Street Y. Thanks to HBO. And just best of luck with it all, and great to talk to you.
Thanks, Alisyn. And Kaitlyn, don't forget to put your seatbelt back on.
Thank you. I won't.
So nice to see everyone.
Bye,
Great to see all y'all.
Good night.
Bye.